Welcome to meeting number 10 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. The committee is meeting on its study of impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the government's ability to deliver information in both official languages. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Madame la Greffière, tout d'abord, est-ce qu'il y a des...
First of all, Madam Clerk, are there any replacements? And who is in the room, please? We have no replacements today and no participants in the room. Okay, thank you very much. So, for those who are participating virtually, here is a bit of information. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own microphone. When you are done speaking, please put your mic on mute to minimize any interference.
Comments by members or witnesses should be addressed through the chair. Should members need to request the floor outside of the designated time for questions, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. Si un député souhaite intervenir dans le...
If a member wishes to intervene on a point of order that has been raised by another member, they should use the raised hand function. This will signal to the chair your interest in speaking and create a speakers list. In order to do so, you should click on participants at the bottom of the screen. When the list pops up, you will see next to your name that you can click raise hand. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. Unless there are exceptional circumstances, the use of headsets with a boom microphone is mandatory for everyone participating remotely. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise the chair. Please note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. There is no one participating in the room, so if you wish to make a point of order, please turn on your mic and state clearly that you wish to raise a point of order. Now, with regard to the witnesses who will speak today, the clerk of the committee and I will do our best to maintain consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they're participating virtually or in person. I would like to inform you that I'll take 5 minutes at the end of this meeting because we have to adopt the budget of the committee. So now I would like to welcome our witnesses very cordially. We have with us for the first hour Mr. Raymond Théberge, Commissioner of Official Languages. We're very pleased to see you again. Mr. Pierre Leduc, Assistant Commissioner, Policy and Communications Branch. Ms. Ghislaine Sakali, Assistant Commissioner, Compliance Assurance Branch. And Pascal Giguère, General Counsel, Legal Affairs Branch. Monsieur Théberge, you will have 7.5 minutes for your speech. And I must remind you that I have these cards that I use to tell you that you have 1 minute left. And when I use the red card, it's like soccer. It means that the time is completely up. So, having said that, Mr. Théberge, you have the floor. You have 7.5 minutes for your speech, your introduction. Mr. Théberge, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee. Good morning. or good afternoon rather. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this study on the impact of COVID-19 on the government's ability to provide information in both official languages. Although today's meeting takes place on a virtual platform, I would like to point out that I'm addressing you from Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. I'm happy to join you in your different territories and communities.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Excuse-moi, Monsieur Théberge. Oui.
I'm sorry, Mr. Théberge.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, my channel is on English, and Mr. Théberge, his translation is coming through at the same time as he is speaking in French, and so I think he has to, either the interpreters need to do something, or he needs to put himself on the French or the English channel or French channel. Sorry.
Oui, merci, Monsieur Duguid.
Thank you, Mr. Duguid. Mr. Théberge may not have the last version of Zoom. Madam Clerk, with the technicians, could you please tell me what should be done about this? Mr. Théberge, do you have version 5.4 of Zoom? But before we check that, at the bottom of your screen it says interpretation with a globe. Are you on French when you speak French? I just put it on French. I've just clicked French. It was on English before. All right, so you probably have an old version of Zoom. If you speak English during your speech, please manually change this to English, please. Fine, thank you very much. Thank you. Carry on, please, Mr. Théberge.
Has impacted Canadians' lives. This unprecedented health crisis has exposed several shortcomings related to the respect of official languages and the capacity to communicate equally in French and English. These shortcomings didn't only happen recently, but also during several other emergency situations over the last decade. Vous le savez déjà.
You already know that this pandemic has greatly impacted Canadian lives. This unprecedented health crisis has exposed several shortcomings related to the respect of our official languages and the capacity to communicate equally in French and English. Last April, I spoke to all the deputy ministers and official languages champions of federal institutions. I reminded them of the importance of meeting their obligations related to communicating with the public and with their employees in both official languages at all times. This is essential to protect the health and safety of all Canadians.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, my office has received more than 100 complaints related to the crisis, and 84 of them have been found admissible and are currently under investigation. I also felt it was essential to better understand the problems faced by the public and to make specific recommendations for the federal government to address the gaps in the communications with the public. J'ai donc lancé.
So, at the end of October, I published my report, A Question of Respect and Safety, the Impact of Emergencies on Official Languages. Some of the most striking examples I have seen since the beginning of the pandemic include holding press conferences in a single official language, labeling disinfectants in a single official languages, sending information materials and alert emails in a single official language to federal officials.
Unilingual alert messaging incidents that have occurred in previous crises, such as Amber or weather alerts. Unfortunately, there are too many examples. One thing is clear. In addition to being a huge lack of respect, these deficiencies are completely unacceptable because they endanger the health and safety of the population in an emergency. 2,000 or so respondents to the questionnaire launched by my office last June were clear and precise. During an emergency, relevant information should be systematically provided by our leaders in both official languages, regardless of the level of government. Certains témoignages sont très éloquents.
Some of the most striking examples are that some people told us that official languages are quickly called into question in emergencies, whether it's labeling on disinfectant bottle or RCMP notifications during dangerous situations. Speed takes precedence over accessibility for citizens speaking the minority official language.
It was necessary for him to obtain communications in the language of his choice. He told us that in a state of stress, fatigue, and crisis, it was quite possible that his capacity to understand his second language was weak, that he might miss information that put his life at risk. There will certainly be other emergency situations, but the problems that we have witnessed must not be repeated. In my report, I propose solutions to the federal government to address the recurring problems of communicating with the public in both official languages in emergency situations. I find that in emergency situations, many federal institutions choose to provide a response immediately only in one official language and rely on translation to provide information in the other language. And while I understand the need to communicate quickly in an emergency, it should never be at the expense of any of our official languages. J'ai donc recommandé au gouvernement.
I therefore recommend that the government implement an action plan to facilitate the drafting and simultaneous delivery of emergency communications of equal quality in both languages. This could include the establishment of an accelerated translation service for emergencies and crisis situations. Another issue is that communications are not integrated into the emergency and preparedness and crisis management planning of institutions. Timely, clear, factual, and available information in English and French is not routinely provided at the same time.
Vous m'avez perdu, là.
I'm a bit lost here. Oops.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Théberge.
On vous voit, ils entendent toujours. Là.
Okay, formal plans and procedures should be amended to include clear directives to ensure that communications of equal quality are issued in both official languages simultaneously in emergency situations. Tous les membres de la direction et fonctionnaires
All managers and public servants involved in emergency or crisis communications, plans, and guidelines, communications should be trained to be able to implement emergency communications plans and guidelines in both official languages. Finally, Canadians expect to receive bilingual communications from their leaders in emergency situations from all levels of government. I therefore recommend that the federal government develop a strategy to encourage and support the various levels of government and work with them to integrate both official languages into communications in emergency or crisis situations.
I believe that with this report, federal institutions now have the tools to address gaps when it comes to communications in both official languages in emergency situations. I urge them to implement the measures I proposed in the coming months in order to make concrete progress in communications in both official languages.
Monsieur Théberge, encore 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
30 seconds left, Mr. Théberge. Time is running out. And I know also that you have already sent us your speaking notes, which means that members have already had a look at them. And you can also finish your speaking notes, the other points you wanted to cover during question period. I would now like to open the floor to members to ask questions. We're starting with 6-minute turns, and Mr. Généreux will have the first question. Go ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me? Perfect. It's always a pleasure to meet you and have you here on our committee, Mr. Théberge. In April, you said that you had communicated with official languages champions in federal institutions and deputy ministers. Should we then understand that they didn't listen to you? Answer. Well, I think that we can observe the following. Early on, there were a number of situations where we saw there were clear gaps in press conferences, for example, and other communications. What I can tell you is after those communications, we did see a number of improvements. The report that we tabled deals not only with COVID, but also emergency situations in general. And what stands out is that the federal government is not equipped to properly deliver information in both official languages to Canadians in an emergency situation. I'll stop you right there because I can't remember, but I think it was a couple of weeks ago we had Ms. Chouinard as a witness from University in Kingston. And she repeatedly brought up the government's reflex. And I would say any level of government, so the government in general, its reflex of thinking about official languages as a nuisance more than a reality or an obligation. And it really struck me when she said that. The government has shown that we shouldn't be surprised that there is so much difficulty in respecting official languages. I have another question. In the new law, should we ensure that there are emergency measures in Canada? Answer. Well, in the preamble of a modernized act, we certainly could specify when the parts apply. When it comes to labeling, for example, it's the Labeling Act that is in effect, and that deals with private businesses. So in a modernized act, certainly I agree, we could specify where the law applies. It's the 50th anniversary, and we received 56,000 eligible complaints at our office. So I think this shows that there is a huge difficulty in ensuring that the federal government respects official languages obligations. Well, I find that very troubling to hear that. And you've received hundreds of complaints since the beginning of the pandemic, 44 being investigated. Can you tell me more about those investigations? Are they related? Are they always about the safety of Canadians? Or sometimes are they about federal government, or rather government communications? Answer. Yes, often they are about government communications. Often they are about civil servant working languages. Sometimes they're about receiving directions or emails in only one language. And during the pandemic, we saw an increase in complaints from the workplace. there's a very important link between working in one's language of choice and receiving the service in one's language of choice. Question. I would like to ask a question about the new act. I always try to deal with the past by saying that it's possible to do better in the future. So what would it be good to include in this new act? We were hoping it would be tabled before Christmas, but I don't think it will be. And there was talk of a white paper as well. But what should be enshrined in this new act to ensure that what has happened will not come to pass again? Because there could be different types of catastrophes in Canada, an earthquake, or there could be something else that happens besides a pandemic that would be of national importance. There were serious problems with government communications because there is not that reflex. How could we enshrine that reflex in the Act? Is that possible, in your opinion? Answer. We're still waiting for this Act, and the important thing with this Act is for there to be coherence. Some parts of the Act, for example, Part 5, doesn't have rules. The part about development in communities doesn't have rules. If there are no rules, it's much more difficult to determine the objectives and define other things. So this should be included in the preamble, or there should be rules included to ensure what you asked. And we need to make sure that the law has more teeth. Thank you, Mr. Théberge and Mr. Généreux. The second question, or a series of questions, will be asked by Mr. Arsenault. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Théberge. It's always a pleasure to welcome you to the committee. I'm going to refer to your report that you produced regarding the pandemic on the lack of information in both official languages. You made 3 recommendations. I only have 6 minutes, so I won't get through all of these. And we have a very strict chair on this committee. So the third recommendation, and the question I'm asking you is not because I don't like the recommendation. Rather, it's because I think it's problematic to enforce. You recommended that the federal government, which has significant expertise in official languages, take measures to encourage and support other levels of government. So that means municipalities and provincial governments. You've received complaints. People told you that there were communication problems for all sorts of disasters, forest fires, pandemic, etc., and that it is necessary for people to be able to understand in their mother tongue, because the knee-jerk reaction happens in the mother language. And so you made reference to federal government encouraging other levels of government. Can you speak to that? Answer. Well, I'll give you a concrete example. The example of a national alert system. This is an initiative that groups up all 3 levels of government, as well as all other emergency or crisis organizations. So this is a forum for them. So we see that the forum exists. And as I say, it's a forum that groups together the federal and provincial levels. So I was talking about how the federal government can use its expertise regarding these alerts, whether they be alerts on forest fires or the climate, etc., and ensure that the communication be done in both official languages. Last week, there was a test run for the alert, excepting Alberta and Saskatchewan. And we observed that communications were in both official languages. But this is very complex. And it's not only the responsibility of the federal government to resolve the problem, it's also the responsibility of provinces and territories and emergency measures organizations. And there's also a private sector role. So this is something that affects all Canadians. And I'm sure that if there was an alert system for all Canadians in both official languages, over 80 or 90% of Canadians would understand. Question, and do you believe provinces are open to receiving this encouragement from the federal government? As you say, Amber Alerts are a good example. There was a tornado warning, and we received it in both official languages. Do you think that provinces and territories are there yet? Do you think they're open to it? Answer, I think the government needs to insist on health and safety of its citizens. And through good cooperation, it would be possible to ensure more safety and security for Canadians. Official languages is a matter that affects all Canadians.
There's also the word support that you used. We have to support all levels of government. What do you mean by support exactly? Well, let me give you a simple example. For instance, during the COVID period, the Translation Bureau developed a very specialized lexicon on everything related to COVID, so we could certainly see whether that expertise could be offered to the provinces and territories. I know that the Translation Bureau is very interested in participating in some kind of specialized unit to respond rapidly to emergencies. So you mean share expertise that the federal government may have built around emergency alerts, regardless of the type of emergency, including the pandemic, and share this with the provinces? Absolutely, yes. During the pandemic, what fascinated me was to see the chief medical officer in PEI be bilingual in New Brunswick. The Minister Kelly has good qualities. He speaks French. But these people aren't eternal. These are exceptions in the history of those provinces. How do you see, during the pandemic, the services and the public health authorities, they have this obligation or this burden, quote unquote, because often they have a burden of emergency. They don't have time to translate. How could we make them understand once and for all that everyone has to understand at the provincial level? Well, it's important. It's interesting that you mention some attempts in some provinces and territories to respond better to the needs of citizens in both official languages. I think that during the ministerial conference on francophonie, Minister Joly said that this is no time to offer fewer services. I think that for the past number of years in many provinces, we've seen an increase in the level of service, the creation of policies, the creation of different units. But what's crucial, I think, is to prioritize things such as emergency situations. So to respond to those situations, we need this. I think that means significant leadership to make sure that all Canadians can obtain information in a timely manner. All specialists will tell you that the most important thing in an emergency is communication. Thank you, Mr. Theberge. Look, what you're saying is very important for us, but unfortunately, I have a difficult job to do. I have to manage time here. So you can get back to that point a little later. The 6 next minutes will be for Mr. Beaulieu. Go ahead, please. Please turn on your microphone, Mr. Beaulieu. Fine. It wasn't working with my space bar. Hello, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you for your presentation. Could you summarize the situation in Quebec? Did you get any complaints? Did it work well, not well, in the case of the pandemic? When we're talking about the study we did, there was one complaint that stood out. That was a pamphlet that was sent out in French to the Anglophone community. For alerts, Quebec always sends them out in a bilingual format. There's never a problem. But the problem that did occur on which we had the most comments was that pamphlet in French distributed to the Anglophone community. Okay, however, if people requested it, they could get it in English. It was the same in my riding. But we'd have to look at this compared to the Charter of the French Language. When it's mass mailings and when it concerns security, maybe it's different. But when we have a mass mailing to everyone, it's in French and in English on demand. The gentleman in my riding who wanted it asked for it in English and he got it. Did you have people who said that they didn't get it in English even though they asked for it? Well, what my information says is that is not that detailed. It's just that they received a pamphlet in French only. Other than that, things went well. Press conferences were bilingual. Premier Legault always finished his press conferences with some words in English. He dedicated some time for English. So we got no complaints about that. In any event, in our study, these would not be complaints that are admissible at the commissioner's level. We wanted to see the picture overall, nationally, be it in Ontario, New Brunswick. We wanted to have an overall picture of what was going on. The recommendations we make are about the federal government. Let's be clear about that. Okay, so to summarize, things did go okay in Quebec. I would say that according to the data we have, with the exception of that one pamphlet, quite honestly, we did not receive many complaints from Quebec. Now, there are other observations here. In your report, you talk about the regions that are designated bilingual. There was a reflex to put French aside. Could one of the reasons for that be that there are many people who have bilingual positions officially speaking, and they may have gotten French training but haven't practiced? And the working language generally is English. So it becomes difficult then. What do you attribute these difficulties to? Well, if we go back to 2017, in our report on working languages in the public service, we did note that a lot of work is done in English. Often French is seen as a translated language. So that certainly contributes to those situations. These are crisis or emergency situations where that's accentuated. And if we look back to the satisfaction survey for employees, we see that 91 to 92% of Anglophone public servants say they can work in the language of their choice, 62 or 63% of Francophones only. There's a cultural aspect within the public service, and that report made recommendations. And when we talk about the modernization of the Official Languages Act, we could specify everything about working languages to make sure it's both official languages. Okay. There may be one thing that's even more problematic, and that's when employees in a bilingual designated region have to communicate in a region that's not designated bilingual. At that point, it's difficult for them to work in French, let's say, or the language of their choice. Well, in the current context of working virtually, regardless of where you are, that means that that kind of situation will be much more common. Do you think that there's any way to improve that by making the bilingual designated positions more demanding, better training? I don't know what I was told, and I don't know to what extent it's true, but there are people who are not bilingual, but that are accepted on condition that they undergo French training. Sometimes they get their training, but they never practice again. And therefore, they are not able to speak in French. 10 seconds, Mr. Tiberge. I'll get back to that. I was talking about Section 91 and the designation of language capacity for a position. That contributes to this situation. Thank you very much. Next minutes for Ms. Ashton. Please turn on your microphone, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the Commissioner. My question is based on comments that you made last time you appeared before our committee. I asked you a question about the impact of the modernization of the Official Languages Act would have had on government communications during emergency situations. I know that you made those comments and that you will repeat yourself today. But I want to be sure that your recommendations will be in the committee's report on this study. In your opinion, is it urgent that the Official Languages Act be modernized? Well, quite clearly the law must be modernized. We tabled a position document about that last year. The work was done on part of the parliamentary committees and stakeholders. Now we're at the point where this act must be modernized. It has to be more modern, more relevant, more dynamic, and more robust than it is right now. It's 50 years old. The world has changed a great deal in 50 years. And thank you. You said that many parts of the Act have no regulations. You said sections 5 and 7, for instance. Were there deficiencies by all the previous governments on the framework for this legislation because they did not publish regulations? Could the government adopt regulations during the crisis to correct this situation? It's always possible to come up with a regulation. I think that in the past, in 1988, there were not necessarily any changes to the Act. Where are we now? Well, it's more than regulations we need. I think there have to be changes that are structural, significant changes when it comes to the structure of the legislation, because regulations apply to parts of the bill that already exist. If they don't exist, you can't change them. I think that if we're looking at modernization completely, the Act has to be completely revised. You explained that you received hundreds of complaints. Are we correct to believe that all these are about deficiencies in French language communications? The vast majority. I'd say the very vast majority dealt with communication problems in French. And as I indicated earlier, very often, French is seen as a translated language. So we're not equipped, we're not prepared in an emergency to respond in both official languages. It's obvious to everyone, but I want to make sure that this is said. There's an unbalance in the state of French and English, and that leads to these complaints about French. How can we remedy these situations, in your opinion? Well, what's important, for instance, is when we're talking about Part 7 of the Act, the development of communities, we really have to reinforce that part of the legislation to make sure that communities have the tools necessary to ensure their development. When we're looking at Part 4, Part 5, we have to really look at the fact that people must be able to work in the language of their choice. Right now, there are no regulations to Part 5. If we want to offer services that are of high quality and communicate in both official languages, we have to make sure that we have the internal capacity to do so. And that is part and parcel of Part 5. I would like to add that bilingual bonuses, have been the same for a long time. Should the government do more, in your opinion, to provide an incentive for public servants to become bilingual? Well, that's a question that has been asked often. To my mind, I don't know whether the bilingual bonus encourages bilingualism at all, but there have been discussions going on about that as we speak. Lastly, I'd like to get back to modernization of the Official Languages Act. How can such an act, if modernized, guarantee that government communications with the public are of the same quality in French and English? Well, if we had an act that had regulations about the field of application of the Act, for instance. Labeling isn't under the Official Languages Act. If we had a more robust Part 5 with far more regulations, we would see that we had the tools, and there might be a cultural change and shift. The reflex we were talking about would exist now. 30 seconds, Ms. Ashton. Rapidly, I wondered whether you were consulted about the white paper announced by the minister. No. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ashton. Thank you, Mr. Thébert.
We're going to start with Mr. Dalton for 5 minutes, please. Mr. Dalton, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup et merci pour...
Thank you very much. And thank you for your presentation, Mr. Thébert. Last week, one of our witnesses said that the Official Languages Act should be seen as a tool and not an obstacle. And that was their position regarding the emergency COVID situation, and it seems that that's your position as well. Here in BC, I recently had a conversation with an organization that represents Francophones and Francophiles. And they told me that it took twice as long to obtain services from Service Canada compared to how long it takes for the Anglophone community. It took 8 weeks in contrast with 4 weeks rather. Do you think this is acceptable? And do you have any other comments? I'm specifically speaking about Service Canada here because this is a government organization that is extremely important for employment and many other things and other services for Canadians. Answer. A basic principle regarding official languages is real equality. That means it should be possible to receive service in one's language of choice, and that service should be at the same level of quality, no matter what the language. And if you say that Anglophones were receiving services in 4 weeks and Francophones in 8 weeks, that is a clear indication that the quality is not equal. One of our obstacles or issues right now is that we're very far from achieving true equality between the two official languages. That is one of the objectives of the Act. However, we observe that in numerous situations, it is not the case. Question. Here in BC, Francophones and Francophiles were better served than by the provincial government than by the federal government. They received COVID information quicker from the BC government, even though it's officially unilingual. I know that BC wasn't the only province to be in that situation. You said that sending out unilingual information is disrespectful. And it's all well and good to say that one is for both official languages, but it's actions that count. However, COVID is not the first time that Canada has been in an emergency. Sometimes there are local emergencies as well. So tell us, why do you think we're in this situation? Answer. We have been studying emergency situations for a decade. It is very clear that federal institutions do not have the necessary structures in place to provide those services and to respond quickly in both official languages. People are not necessarily in place to be able to do it. There's not a capacity to do it, and official languages are not necessarily taken into account in the planning stage. When we make the diagnosis, we observe that there are many gaps in federal institutions when it comes to official languages. So things are not documented, and we notice that when it comes to communications in federal institutions, this capacity is being built currently. This capacity must be built up right away when it comes to communications from federal institutions in preparation for emergency situations. In your report, you pointed out that numerous federal institutions have absolutely no directives for communicating with the public or personnel in emergency situations. Could you expand on that? I'm sorry, but there is no time left. I didn't want to cut you off there. I'm sorry. We'll be able to come back to that. Next, for the next few minutes, Ms. Latanzio has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Theberge, for being with us today.
Regards to the situation in Quebec specifically, I understand that my colleague said that you only, it went relatively well, and you said that you had received only one complaint with regards to the flyer that was received in French, and then it was immediately corrected. But does that exclude the fact that, the minority English community in Quebec still faces obstacles when it comes to the delivery of services in health? Just because one does not launch a complaint does not necessarily mean that, there's not, like they say in French, des lacunes. I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Okay, maybe I'd like to clarify one point. When we talk about the flyer that was sent out in French, it is a number of people who raised that issue. It's just not one person. Okay. It was the most significant complaint that was highlighted by the English-speaking community of Quebec. I think when it comes to health and the information, that should be provided in the language, in both official languages. Health, as you know, is a provincial jurisdiction. I'm not going to go into all the debate around provincial federal jurisdiction, but I think that it's important for all citizens when they're in situations of vulnerability that they be able to understand the information provided in their language. In their first language. And I think it's a question of respect. I mentioned that, but it's also a question of security. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're looking at some medication, you can't read it. It could be very dangerous. But I do think that, at a very human level, you should be able to communicate, because it's often when you're in a health situation, you're stressed out, it's a crisis. I get confused in my second language if I get stressed. So I think it's very important to keep that as sort of the fundamental rule. Is it's a question of respect.
Okay, I get that. I totally get that. I enjoyed reading your report, and I agree with you. I'm going to take you now to Section 7 of the Official Language Act. I know we spoke a lot on Section 5. So we know that the government of Canada has committed a total of $22.5 million over the 5 years in the health sector to improve access to services in the official languages in the minority communities, to support the existing health networks and communities on the ground. So how does this work with the existing supports from provincial jurisdiction? And more importantly, do the provinces have the proper structures to support the OLM communities?
Well, what we're doing at the moment is, this is part of the action plan. So we are looking at the implementation of the action plan. We're working with various stakeholders in various provinces to see how the program is rolling out. Is it having the impact that we're hoping it will have on the official language minority community, whether it's in Quebec or Manitoba, whatever the case may be. So we're looking at that. So I think it's a bit early to say whether or not it's working or not working, but we do have a lot of high expectations when it comes to the action plan, because it is one of the significant investments that we are making in OLMCs. So we are looking at that, and we will be talking to various stakeholders to see how is it rolling out.
Okay. Ma prochaine question porte sur...
My next question is on symmetry. Recently, a study was carried out regarding rights in both official languages. Could you comment on the enforcement and the respect of official languages in the health sector first in the country? And secondly, has the pandemic shown that there are asymmetries in services provided in different provinces? Answer. Those are very broad questions. I'm not sure how deep I'll be able to go into them. The Act speaks about symmetry. And in a number of provinces, there are asymmetrical arrangements on the ground. So what we are noticing is, whether it be in healthcare or otherwise, or rather what we want to know is how much transparency there is regarding investments and how much accountability there is. And as I said, this is not only regarding the health sector. This is an extremely important matter. Thank you very much, Mr. Theberge. For the next question period, I will give the floor to Mr. Beaulieu, rather. You have 2.5 minutes. Excellent. I would like to continue on what we were talking about earlier on designating jobs. How could we strengthen bilingual requirements? Answer. Well, recently there was something published on Section 91 saying that the linguistic requirements of jobs must be specified in an objective way, because very often they are not defined objectively. So we provided a tool to the Treasury Board Secretariat to ensure that jobs are properly classified. Because often when jobs are classified, linguistic requirements are underestimated, and this leads to services not being able to be provided. So Section 91 must be respected, and that means objectively defining linguistic requirements in jobs. It's very important. Another question. The OLA has existed for 52 years. You have said that you're sounding the alarm. We're talking about French as a language of translation. And we've seen a very pronounced decline in French in the rest of Canada and in Quebec. Should we not be wondering about the underlying policies to the OLA? Because clearly the decline of French is continuing. It has even been amplified since the OLA has been in place. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to obtain services in French. Answer. I think part of the answer to your question is the following. We have to ask ourselves where we would be without the OLA. I'm from Manitoba. I'm a Francophone from Manitoba. And I can assure you that the OLA has been very beneficial to our development. And I wouldn't even like to imagine where we would be without the OLA. However, it is clear that the Act as it exists today, does it give us the tools necessary to continue to help our communities thrive? I think that is a question that should give us serious pause. And I'd like to link this to the throne speech. The throne speech mentioned the state of French. And I think that that should lead to us to reflection as well. Thank you, Mr. Theberge. Dear members, we're coming up on the last question. I did say the last question, and Ms. Ashton has it for 2.5 minutes. As you know, afterwards we will suspend and carry out our sound tests. So on that note, Ms. Ashton, you have 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, you confirmed that you have not been consulted on the white paper, and I think that this shows that the government is creating this white paper behind closed doors and is not taking official languages seriously. You said that, or rather, the committee has studied modernizing the Act, and at our last meeting, the committee said that consultation should be necessary to modernize the Act. Do you agree that modernization should have been the next step instead of a white paper that was prepared by?
Well, the work was done, as I mentioned, by the parliamentary committees, by us. There were many interventions and consultations. The material is there to modernize the Act. We're always pushing for 2021 to have this Act modernized. The time has come. It's urgent. But like everyone else, we're waiting for the next steps that are set out by the government. Thank you, Commissioner. As you said, we're in a hurry to see this report of what happened during the crisis. This could be a matter of life and death. Is this a failure, in your opinion, that the LAC won't be modernized before the end of this session? Well, what I'm disappointed about is the fact that the government hasn't proceeded, on the one hand. On the other hand, I have no choice but to be optimistic that in the next session we will see progress, we will see a bill tabled that will reflect the needs of this new reality in the linguistic landscape. Thank you, Ms. Ashton. We only have 10 seconds, so I will stop there with your permission. I would also like to thank Mr. Theberge for his presence. We're always delighted to welcome you and salute the people with you, Mr. Pierre Leduc, the Assistant Deputy, Ms. Sekali, Assistant Commissioner, Compliance Assurance, Pascal Giguère, General Counsel, Legal Branch. It was a pleasure to see you today, and I hope we'll have an opportunity to be together in next year. So thank you for everything. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I will suspend for a few seconds to allow our guests for the second panel to come in and to allow the people from the Commission of Official Language resuming our session. We are meeting regarding the study entitled Impact of the COVID-19 Pandemic on the Government's Ability to Deliver Information in Both Official Languages.
For the
I
benefit
did the
of the witnesses. So, OK, Madame Dubreuil, ils sont en train de discuter avec vous.
They're talking to you? You can continue, Mr. Dubourg. All right, so
I recognize you by name. And when you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Les services d'interprétation.
Interpretation services offered for this video conference are about the same as that offered during regular committee meetings. So on the bottom of your screen, you can choose the floor, French, or English. When you speak, please speak slowly and clearly. And when the floor is not yours, please be on mute, please. Now, I'd like to welcome very cordially our witnesses, the witness who will begin this by a 7.5-minute speech, followed by questions by members. I also want to inform you that I have a card here to indicate that you have 1 minute left and a red carton when you have no more time left. So that's a difficult job that I have to do. Sometimes I have to cut you off during your speech. So I'd like to welcome Ms. Linda Lauzon, Director General of the Association de la Presse Francophone, Ms. Fatiha Gatri-Gamiri, Executive Director of the East Island Network for English Language Services, Ms. Jennifer Johnson, Executive Director of the Community Health and Social Services Network. And from the Public Service Commission, we have Mr. Patrick Borbet, President, and Susan Dubreuil, Acting Director General, Personnel Psychology Center. So, I'd like to begin with the 7.5 minutes with Ms. Lauzon, please. Ms. Lauzon, please turn on your microphone and proceed with your introductory speech. You have the floor. Madame Lauzon, we can't hear you. Is your microphone connected? You're on mute. You're on mute. Please go ahead. Ms. Lauzon, there's also a mute button on your cord, which may be on. No. Ms. Lauzon, I see that you're shaking your head, but look, we can get back to your speech a little later to allow you to connect properly with the help of our technicians. So we'll go on to the East Island Network for English Language Services.
Your mic, please turn on your mic, please. Not yet. Your mic, it's still. Voilà. Voilà.
Désolé,
Alors, allez-y. Non, je vous.
I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I know the chairman gave us 7.5 minutes. I'll take 1.5 minutes because I want to give time to my colleague, Ms. Johnson. I represent the East Island Network for English Language Services. We're based in the east part of the island, and we have community partners who work on social and health services in English in the east and the north of Montreal. I sent a card, I don't know if it was distributed, It represents almost 2/3 of the island of Montreal. The Anglophone population that we serve is almost 164,000 people, from Ville-Saint-Laurent to Pointe-aux-Trembles to Hochelaga. I'm pleased to see members of Parliament, at least 4, from these ridings. With regards to today's topic, English language information for our communities, we can tell you that the situation of Quebec is exceptional. So we try to obtain all information on the federal government website, and more specifically, during the pandemic, all information was obtained because it was published in both official languages on Member of Parliament's websites or Facebook pages. They know we follow them, and that gives us some satisfaction. However, to give you a picture of access to information in English, I'd like to indicate that Jennifer Johnson has an organization that includes 26 networks throughout Quebec. So I think I've spoken for my minute and 10 seconds, so I'll allow Jennifer to speak. You went a little over that, but Ms. Johnson, please go ahead. Turn on your microphone. You have the floor.
For me to be here today. So as Fatia said, I represent the English-speaking provincial organization called the Community Health and Social Services Network. So I'm going to give you a portrait with a lens on health and social services in the English-speaking community in Quebec and a community-based response to the COVID pandemic and the use of federal information and the importance of it for the community. As Fatia mentioned, there is a network of organizations across the province. I gave a map to you prior to this meeting. I hope you had a chance to look at it. It gives you really interesting information about population size and proportion. But you know, we have over 1 million English speakers in the province of Quebec, and they're distributed all across the province. Each one is very different. The Health Canada has been supporting these networks since 2004 to improve their capacity to improve access to English language health and social services. And I can tell you that the work that we've been doing since 2014 was a critical element for these organizations to be prepared for a crisis situation that we experienced with COVID-19. The community became a lifeline for the English-speaking populations in terms of finding and getting the information that they needed. I surveyed all of our networks, all 25 of our networks, and 100% of them used information coming from the Government of Canada website. Of them, 56% of them used it regularly. So it was on a regular basis. 44% used them occasionally. 89% said it was easy to find. The other ways that they found out about the information from the Government of Canada was partners would refer them. Actually, Fatia mentioned members of Parliament themselves and their Facebook pages were critical resources. These community organizations then used this information and distributed it to the English-speaking community through newsletters, Facebook page, newspapers, websites. They actually even, in some instances where they had very vulnerable populations, they actually hired professionals to help, for example, people on the Magdalen Islands who are English speakers, very unilingual English speakers, navigate the whole compensation information coming from the federal government. So these organizations, I think, were a critical element in ensuring that the English-speaking community got the information that they needed, that the government was providing. I'll just give you a quote. One of our networks that's based in the Ottawa, in the Outaouais, they actually surveyed their English-speaking community about what resources they went to look for information. And of those surveyed, 42% of them went to the Canada.ca website for information versus 25% that went to the Quebec.ca information. So the federal government is still playing a really important role in making sure that the English-speaking community in Quebec gets the critical information that they needed during a crisis. As I imagine you've heard multiple times, the linguistic barrier becomes a really, really pivotal problem in a crisis situation. And so I think that the information that we were able to get from the federal government really complemented what the Quebec government was doing to ensure that the English-speaking community got information. So I think my time is close to wrapping up there. So I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Johnson. And right now, I don't know if I can go back to Mrs. Lauzon. Est-ce que Madame Lauzon de l'Association de la presse francophone?
Oui, bon. Ms. Lauzon, from the Francophone Press Association. Excellent. Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, committee members, thank you for welcoming us today.
As the executive director of l'Association de la presse francophone, but also as an authorized representative of the Consortium for Official Languages Media, which represents 105 community minority radios and newspapers. The 4 members are l'Association de la presse francophone, representing minority francophone community media, community newspapers of Canada, l'Alliance des radios communautaires, representing the minority francophone community radios of Canada, the Quebec Community Newspapers Association, representing the minority anglophone community newspapers of the province of Quebec, and the English Language Arts Network, representing the minority anglophone community radios of the province of Quebec as well. Since the summer of 2016, we have pooled our expertise, our experience, and the strength of our respective networks. Now all 4 organizations work hand in hand and speak with one voice for our sector. Maintenant, je vais aller en français. Qu'est-ce que...
Now I'll switch to French. So what is official language minority community media? There are new faces on the committee, so I feel it's important to reiterate what OLMC media is in contrast with other mass media. So it is an essential service because it is often the only source, local source of journalism for an official language community. And this role as an essential service was very key right from the start of the pandemic. It is a voice and a reflection of a minority community that is very often isolated in a remote area or even in a city. It is a tool for community building, and it is a tool for identity building that contributes to the vitality of OLMCs. It is a space that enables exchange of ideas and information, and that was used to the fullest during the pandemic. And it is also an indicator of the vitality of OLMCs. And governments often refer to them. I would now like to talk about the essential role of OLMC media in keeping their communities informed during the pandemic. I'm sure you are aware of numerous cuts to federal advertising in traditional media in favor of web giants. However, the government has taken steps in the right direction, finally, on this. OLMC media were hit twice as hard by these cuts because the critical mass of potential announcers for the vast majority of our radio stations and newspapers is a tiny fraction of the pool available to other media. So, as highlighted by the Commissioner in his June 2018 decision, and following a complaint from our organizations, before those cuts, the federal government did not see fit to assess the impact of its decisions on local media. And since the Official Language Commissioner's decision, no adjustments have been made whatsoever by PSPC to rectify the situation. I could give you many examples, but I will give you just the example of the federal COVID-19 advertising campaign of $30 million announced in April 2020. Out of this campaign, our media received, on average, $1,500 each, which is only 0.5% of the total funding. This is unacceptable. When we learned that other media had received so much more funding than we had. And this means that the responsibility of educating and informing OLMCs, which we all do in our community media platforms, fell on our shoulders and not by public broadcasters in the regions. We were only thrown crumbs. The pandemic had a significant effect on the already undermined capacity of community media to serve their target communities. Our role was more and more important during the pandemic and more in demand. Since the spring, traffic on social media, websites, and our listener numbers increased by between 35 and 45%, depending on the region. People turned to their community media. This shows, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the importance and the relevance of local media during the pandemic. Thanks to many support measures and ad hoc programs put in place by the government, our community media, which are local media, first and foremost, as you know, we're still able to deliver and often explain information sent by the federal government and provincial and territorial governments and municipal governments. Now I would like to mention that emergency measures put in place by the government directly contributed to the ability of local media to keep our communities informed. Many OLMC media availed of a number of these measures, and this enabled our media to play their key role of an essential service. So that enabled us to be there on the ground. We are worried about the future. We are worried about what will happen after the pandemic. OLMC media are an essential service, but we must have the resources to do our job. And it's not with the $1,500 that we received that we'll be able to do it. I'd also like to speak about the Local Journalism Initiative, which was instrumental. That program enabled us to have a presence and to deliver high-quality civil journalism during the pandemic. However, other media, or rather local media, have only a $9,000 budget per year. This is an excellent program. It's been proven, but the funding was not adapted. It's essential for the government to increase that funding to help us. You're on mute, Mr. Dubourg. Oh, it happens to me too. Well, I just wanted to thank you, Ms. Lauzon, and let you know that we are understanding better and better the association's role. And now, from the Public Service Commission, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Patrick Borby. Thank you, Chair, for having invited me to appear today with my colleague Susan Dubreuil. I would like to recognize that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people.
Quickly adapt and ensure that our obligations under the Official Languages Act were respected during the pandemic. I will also discuss actions that the Public Service Commission took to ensure that departments and agencies were able to staff bilingual positions including those in response to the crisis. Finally, I hope I could provide you some data on public service staffing that I hope the committee will find useful for its study. Afin de remplir ses obligations découlant de la loi sur les langues.
To respect our obligations under the OLA during the pandemic, the PSC quickly adapted to changing circumstances. The department took action both internally with its employees, in accordance with Part 5 of the OLA, as well as in communications and services with its clients and with the public, in accordance with Part 6 of the Act. Part 4 of the Act, pardon me. Since March, all communications with employees have continued to be in both official languages simultaneously. This includes frequent email messages from myself, COVID-19 updates, and any other internal communications to employees. Over the past 9 months, we held 3 virtual bilingual all-staff meetings. We have been finding innovative solutions to deliver these events with simultaneous interpretation. In my role as leader of the organization, I raise official languages obligations with my executive management team on a regular basis, and I insist that employees have the right to write and speak in their preferred official language.
With Canadians have continued to be in both official languages and released simultaneously in both French and English. This includes the content of our website and social media, answering public inquiries, and providing information sessions to job seekers. Prior to and throughout the pandemic, I have ensured that when I'm invited to participate in any event, I always deliver my remarks in both official languages. In response to the pandemic, the PSC has partnered with Health Canada in establishing an inventory of volunteers to support provinces, territories, and the Canadian Red Cross in their urgent health human resource needs. All materials were bilingual, and communications with Canadians were in the official language of their choice. The safety, security, and well-being of our clients and employees is critical to our service delivery and in designing new staffing and assessment solutions, but never at the expense of the Official Languages Act. Comme vous le savez, plusieurs organismes ont des responsabilités à l'égard des langues officielles.
In accordance with the Public Service Employment Act, deputy heads are responsible for establishing official language proficiency as an essential qualification required for the work to be performed. They are also accountable for ensuring their employees meet the official language requirements of their positions. The Office of the Chief Human Resources Officer is responsible for policies related to languages in communications and services to the public, as well as official languages in the workplace. They are also responsible for establishing second official language qualification standards. The PSC's primary role is in the assessment of official languages, including the provision of second language evaluation tests.
For bilingual positions, the PSC appointment policy requires that all departments and agencies in the core public administration use PSC tests. These evaluations are administered in PSC test centers across the country, as well as in selected departments and agencies. In addition, our tests are widely used by separate employers, such as the Canada Revenue Agency and the Canadian Armed Forces. These tests ensure that merit is met with respect to staffing bilingual positions so that Canadians can be served in the official language of their choice and public servants can work in the official language of their choice. On an annual basis, the PSC conducts and oversees more than 100,000 second language tests. Our databases hold over 4 million test results, the majority of which are second language test results. There are close to 86,000 bilingual positions in the federal core public administration, not counting separate agencies. This represents 43% of all core public administration positions. La pandémie a eu des répercussions sur les activités gouvernementales dans de nombreux domaines. Dans notre cas, elle a affecté la capacité d'administrer en personne des tests d'évaluation de langue seconde. La CFP a rapidement mis en œuvre 2 mesures temporaires et des directives de soutien afin d'offrir plus de souplesse au ministère quant à l'évaluation des exigences de langue seconde liées au poste bilingue. Ces 2 mesures visent à garantir le respect du mérite en matière de langues officielles et les obligations linguistiques prévues par la loi sur les langues officielles. Ces mesures ont permis aux administrateurs généraux de recruter les talents bilingues nécessaires pour soutenir les efforts liés à la COVID-19 et pour assurer le fonctionnement efficace du gouvernement du Canada. Un sondage éclair a été mené auprès des organisations afin d'obtenir leur rétroaction au sujet de ces mesures. Le sondage a révélé que plus de 90% des répondants trouvaient que les deux mesures étaient utiles afin de rencontrer leurs besoins en matière de dotation. De plus, la CFP a mis en œuvre de nouvelles entrevues de langue seconde.
Monsieur le Président, la traduction ne fonctionne pas.
Mr. Chairman, the interpretation isn't okay. I will stop for a few seconds. Madam Clerk, can you check whether the interpretation is working? Mr. Borby, did you select the right language under interpretation? When you're speaking French or English, you have to choose the right language. I don't need interpretation. I put it off. It's indicated that you have the right version of Zoom. Just a moment, please. Do all the other members of Parliament hear the interpreter in English? So we hear the interpretation too. Mr. Borby, perhaps you could continue and we'll check that the problem has been solved. Mr. Beaulieu, I sent the text. I sent it in both official languages, so I hope you can distribute it to members. Yes, absolutely. But nevertheless, direct conversation with us may be difficult, but you will continue, please. And Mr. Beaulieu, don't hesitate to indicate immediately whether there's a problem. So go ahead, Mr. Borby. Okay, so I was talking about new second language interviews we've developed for oral proficiency. They are administered remotely by PSC assessors to candidates in their own homes. On November 20th, over 5,000 virtual interviews had been administered.
Testing to evaluate second language reading and writing skills. These tests are performed online by candidates in their home. We recognize that remote internet testing is the way of the future for second language evaluations. We are working diligently to incrementally enhance our remote testing to better meet the needs of departments and agencies, as well as those of Canadians who no longer have to travel to our offices for tests. This is a priority for the PSC. The PSC also continues to ensure that our tests are accessible to all Canadians, including those with disabilities. All new second language evaluations are reviewed by test development experts for accessibility and fairness. They are also available in multiple formats to accommodate the needs of diverse test takers. Je vais laisser la dernière partie, vous l'avez par écrit, ça vous donne un peu des...
I'll leave you with the last part. It gives you some statistics about the number of bilingual candidates in the federal government. There's a great deal of interest. There are a lot of bilingual candidates throughout the country, and we're concentrating particularly on minority language communities, both in Quebec and outside Quebec, when it comes to francophones, in order to get the best candidates possible. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Borby. I also want to thank all the witnesses who are there, because you sent us your texts as well, and that was shared with members. And I urge you to send us briefs if you have any in the framework of this study or any other we conduct. I'd now like to go into questions, so I would ask for cooperation from my colleagues because it's already 5:05 p.m. and we have to dedicate 5 minutes at the end to approve the committee budget. So we'll simply have the first turn, 6 minutes per member of parliament. If you wish to share your time with another colleague, please don't hesitate to indicate that to me. So with that, the first 6 minutes will be for Mr. Williamson.
Go ahead.
Oui, merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think things are working here. I'd like to begin with a question for Ms. Johnson.
You had a lot to say about how well the rollout went during the pandemic, but I think you kind of missed the real spice, which was what happened beforehand that this planning took place so your organizations were ready and you're able to communicate effectively and offer your services and programs. Could you talk about the planning? Because that's, I think, goes to the root of this study. It's the preparation that allows for the good work to happen after the fact. Ici aussi, si votre collègue.
And if your colleague, Ms. Gibbonry, has comments about this, we would welcome that as well.
Super important with regards to what we've experienced. So like I said, fundamentally, we had a very good base. So the resources that we'd been receiving from Health Canada to vitalize, to give these networks the capacity to know their community, know who the partners are, have good relationships, that was well established. And I'd have to say that was a critical element in the success factor of the community response to this crisis. Because yes, we were all thrown off our game for the first couple of weeks when the pandemic hit. But I have to say that they were able to move everybody into their homes, develop all of their relationships with their partners virtually, and then actually begin to even develop programming virtually, one-on-one, by telephone, with their vulnerable populations fairly quickly. And I can't emphasize enough how important it was that they had this capacity at the community level already developed in order to be able to evolve so quickly to the new reality that had been forced upon us. And the other element that I think is really critical is that those partnerships that had been established during periods of non-crisis were critical for the next, for this response. So the public health institutions turned to these community organizations, and FATIA is a great example of that too. They turned to these community organizations to make sure that they were connecting to the English-speaking community. They actually supported. I have an example of one network that decided to do a flu vaccine clinic for the English-speaking community, and they did it in partnership with their CIS, their local CIS. So they were able to bring out, 60 seniors every, an hour or something like that with regards to, flu vaccines that normally, wouldn't have happened. And give those seniors, and the community trusted these organizations too. And I think that was also a really important part of the response. And last but not least, before I hand it over to Vatia, I think that the planning, so you said, how did the planning? So we had this great structure, and then we had, I think, sort of like leadership with regards to, how the community can connect to the vulnerable populations through the CIS and CIS. That not every one of them. I mean, obviously, it's depends on the territory, but they actually were identifying vulnerable populations and asked our communities to do so as well. And also, in terms of making sure that those lines of communication, whether it be federal government information or provincial government information, the community knew about it. Because, we had a very high level of information available in English once the wheels got in motion. Yes, there was a very, a delay in terms of making things available in English, but it's it's a pandemic. I mean, you can't expect the next day after a pandemic is announced for everything to be smooth. There's always going to be.
Just to be clear, was that delay from the Quebec government, both governments?
I noticed it most from the Quebec government, but that's because that's their health and social services is their domain, and they have to develop but I can't criticize them too much. Sure. I mean, I think it was a normal delay in some ways.
Yeah. No, and I wasn't looking for a criticism, just a clarification. Alors, me reste seulement une minute.
I only have 1 minute left. Ms. Guimeri, do you have anything to add for us? Your microphone is on mute. Ms. Guimeri, can you hear me? No. Yes, I can hear you. Do you have any comments? Perhaps you have 45 seconds, not much time. Okay, that's fine. The only thing I could add anyway is that at the more local level, the demand was local, of course, and we took advantage of our partnerships with community groups that are francophone in the field. They're the ones who brought us information, and we made sure that it was transmitted. So we got in partnership with everywhere we were connected. Thank you, Mr. Williamson, Ms. Guimeri. The next 6 minutes will be for Mr. Duguid. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank our guests for their excellent presentations. I'm going to share my time with Ms. Latancio, and my question, I just have one question, is for Mr. Borby. I'm a Western Canadian MP from the province of Manitoba, where we have a very vibrant and historic Francophone and Métis community. 20% of our Canadian public service resides in Western Canada, and I'm wondering if you could share with us what could we do to better prepare our public service in the West to serve our community in emergency situations in French, in situations like floods, COVID-19. I know the community, based on my interactions, feel somewhat underserved, and maybe comment on both training and bilingual requirements.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a big question. That some of it is way beyond in terms of my area of responsibility. I can tell you that in our recruitment efforts, obviously we're always looking for bilingual candidates in all regions of the country, and hoping that departments again will use our inventories, whether it's through student programs or graduate programs, or people who are at mid-career that have some capacity in both official languages, and that they will hire to improve their capacity to be able to serve those local communities. The government is also committed to an additional large number of points of service in both official languages, and we stand prepared to help with the staffing efforts that are going to be required to be able to meet that. I think one of the things that departments need to do, and again, this is the responsibility of deputy heads, is to make sure that their business continuity plans appropriately reflect their obligations for official languages. And that's certainly something that in my own organization, I made sure. And we're going to be improving our BCP because we learned a lot through this last pandemic. But I think a lot of departments have to take a look at that and see how they can strengthen it.
Thank you. Ms. Latancio.
Madame Latancio.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In my time, I'm going to ask you a question and ask you to possibly submit it, if you can, in writing, basically with regards to since the Health Canada Act does not contain specific commitments with regards to official languages, if the main linguistic legislation at the federal level does not address this, and neither does the Canada Health Act, shouldn't this be a recommendation in the new law So I would wish that you would answer this in writing. And with regards to the two ladies, Mrs. Johnson and Miss Gimiri, I understand that during the pandemic, 42% of the minority linguistic Anglophones in Quebec needed to consult the Canada.ca website to get essential information on health services. Any thoughts on what you would recommend so that we can remedy this issue and that the linguistic minority in Quebec be assured that they receive their health services and in their language of their choice? I'd like to hear you both on that.
So it's how do you improve it? I think that one of the elements that could improve is the reality that seniors are not online. Seniors are the biggest problem with accessing information. So you really have to develop a better approach for, getting information to vulnerable populations like that. Also, rural communities don't have good internet. Remote communities don't have good internet. So there has to be more than just an electronic response to getting it. And that's both federal and provincial. In terms of how do you get more information to these populations? I think that developing community capacity to reach vulnerable populations, or even just a regular English-speaking person in the province of Quebec, it's about building that sense of community, developing chains of communication, lines of communication. I would say could keep investing in those elements. Fatia, what would you say?
Madame Gimri, give me.
Ms. Gimiri, your microphone. Thank you, Ms. Latanzio. You asked a very controversial question, so I would prefer to send you the answer in writing. However, we work in partnership with local health institutions on certain services. There's hope because we're seeing a lot of openness. Openness to providing the same services to Anglophone minorities. There are new access plans for the Anglophone community that are going to be released soon. So we will be able to have enhanced monitoring to be able to better provide services in French and English. Thank you very much. Ms. Latanzio, that is all the time that we have. Yes, excuse me, Mr. Chair. I asked witnesses to complement their answers in writing, and I understand that those replies must be sent directly to the clerk. Isn't that right? Yes, that is correct. They already have the clerk's contact information. So for the next 6 minutes, Mr. Beaulieu has the floor. I would like to hear more from Ms. Lauzon on the need of funding Francophone media. She mentioned some numbers, 575 million, and that certain community media had received certain amounts. Can you tell us what your recommendations are? Well, it was 14.5 million for official languages over 5 years in the Official Languages Action Plan. Part of that goes to internships for young people, 4.5 million, and another part was invested in strategic projects. So the government didn't see fit. What we wanted was operating funding because that's what we needed. But unfortunately, that is not what we received, but at least there were those $14.5 million. Now, about registering journalism platforms, the rules apply to 90% of our organizations. But these are very small media platforms that change their business model, and they're taking on freelance reporters because they don't have any more money. And so the criteria for tax credits, etc., don't apply to these small media platforms. There are a number of criteria that were problematic, and 90% of our newspapers ran into problems. And regarding the local journalism initiative, that was $50 million over 5 years. It was announced in 2018 for all newspapers. And in the end, radio stations were included as well. And that's a good thing. It was News Media Canada and the Canadian Press that received the biggest parts of the funding, $7 million per year. And smaller amounts went to other local organizations. But when it comes to community radio stations and newspapers, it really came in handy, but it did not go far enough. So without advertising, it's necessary to find another way to give our media resources to be able to do their job in their respective regions. Towards the end of my presentation, I was saying that the initiative for local journalism is an easy way to invest because the program already existed. No need to reinvent the wheel. This is a program that works. Our media can't receive $8,500 per year when the Toronto Star is getting $60. Question: is the program adapted for small Francophone media? Yes. Anglophone and Francophone. Anglophone in Quebec and Francophone in the rest of Canada. It is not adapted. The funding is not adapted either. In Quebec, if we look at all the different media, in Montreal, for example, there is a wide availability of Anglophone versus Francophone. Answer: yes, think about regions that are struggling to survive, regions that are more remote. My other question, you turned your microphone off. Oh, I have another question for Mr. Borby. He said that things were going well. Now, regarding the commissioner's report that was talking about lack of respect for official languages in certain institutions, some institutions were operating only in one language. In other institutions, the second language was considered second class. As I said, French seems to have been put on the back burner, is sometimes referred to as a translation language. Can you expand on this? Mr. Borby, what I shared with you was my experience in my organization and how we addressed our responsibilities in the pandemic. And also when it comes to services that we offer and language testing that we carry out. So I shared how we adapted during the pandemic. That is what I shared with you. I don't have any more responsibility than other heads of organizations had during the pandemic. However, I can give you the example of my organization and the way that I addressed my responsibilities as an individual. Thank you, Mr. Borby, and thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. And the final 6 minutes are for Ms. Ashton. Over to you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Borby. The pandemic revealed that the government was having difficulty communicating its messages in both official languages to the public. However, we also saw problems within the government itself. Often in the media, we hear that Francophones do not feel at ease speaking up in meetings because they fear they will not be understood. This especially seems to be the case in Gatineau and Ottawa. What should the public service do to correct this situation? Answer. Well, that is a very complex question for me to be able to answer in a few minutes. But a few years ago, with Matthew Mendelson, my colleague, we were asked by the clerk of the Privy Council to prepare a study and a report that made a number of recommendations on how to improve linguistic duality within the public service. And we did shed light on a number of issues as well as best practices in certain departments. And we presented a series of recommendations to the government under the themes of leadership, policies, culture, which is very important, and training and tools. So I have already spoken to that. I agree with you. This is an issue we must keep an eye on. French is a minority, so it's always easy to forget in a meeting situation or to cut corners. But in my position, I do not allow that to happen. And I'm always prepared to work together with my colleagues to help them to find ways to better respect linguistic duality. Thank you. Another question for you. When people do language testing in the public service, do you check what their motivation is? Do you think that increasing the bilingualism bonus would be an effective incentive, especially in bilingual zones? Answer. Well, I am not responsible for the bonus, but I did mention it in my report earlier. I do not personally feel that this is money that is well invested because money is given to people who have already acquired the linguistic skills needed for their job. My preference would be for that money to be reinvested in cooperation with unions to better funding second language training, especially for young civil servants who are joining the public service, to help them learn their second language, be it English or French, so that it doesn't become an obligation for them later on once they want to become a supervisor, for example, and all of a sudden, for them, their language skills become a barrier. I have a question now to clarify. What do you think of having a bonus for people learning the language? Do you think that would be useful? Answer. When it comes to people learning the language, I think what's most worthwhile is having well-funded training tools. Answer. Not much time is left, so I'll continue with a question for Ms. Lauzon. Thank you very much for your witness account. We hear what you say. I am from Manitoba, and independent Francophone media in Manitoba are so important for the vitality of the French-speaking community here in our province.
Ne vous a pas appuyé, surtout alors qu'on sait que les communications en français laissaient à désirer de la part du fédéral. L'achat de publicité...
j'ai la traduction en anglais, là.
I'm getting the English interpretation. The interpreter apologizes. It's her fault. Okay. Go ahead, please. I'm not using it. I'm shocked to hear that the government did not support you when we know that French language communications left to be desired. Buying advertising in your publications would have been crucial, first of all, so that the government can communicate through these publications, but also to take up the space from the advertisers who've disappeared because they have no income during the pandemic. Do you think the government forgot you? Well, look, they forgot us long ago. We even filed a complaint with the Commissioner of Official Languages some time ago. We tried to negotiate with Public Works, explain this to them, and believe it or not, the organization responsible for national advertising, we shared our list with them in real time, live, with cassette at the beginning of the pandemic, so we wouldn't be forgotten, and we got nothing. Crumbs. So we've tried everything to start these things and get that information in our newspapers, unfortunately, and our radio too. And don't forget community radio, that's very important too. But this was not translated into reality. They preferred television, as I said earlier. They preferred public broadcasters, which are funded largely by the state. Thank you, Ms. Lauzon. Thank you, Ms. Ashton. I'm so sorry, but that's all the time we have. I'd like to take the time to thank all witnesses because you cooperated in our study. So Ms. Lauzon from the Association of the Francophone Press, Ms. Gameri of the East Island Network for English Language Services, the Community Health and Social Services Network, Ms. Johnson, and from the Public Service Commission, Mr. Boirbé and Ms. Dubreuil. I thank you very much. And don't hesitate to send us any other information through our clerk, please. You can either disconnect or stay, but for the time being, I will be addressing members of the committee to tell them that with regard to this study, we have a budget that must be adopted. We just sent it to you, $4,250. These are expenses for video conferences, $3,500, and meals if necessary when people are present in the room for $750. We don't need a motion, but the essential thing is I'd like to know from members whether there are any objections to adopting that budget to continue this study that we are currently conducting. So, seeing none, everyone agrees. There's no one in the room. So I thank you all. I'll sign this document, send it on to the clerk so that we can proceed. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your cooperation and thank all the staff, the interpreters, the clerk, technicians for the work we've done. And I invite you on Thursday, you will receive a notice of meeting. So have a good evening, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.